Good afternoon. Welcome to Roberts and Janice Live, this time for January the 7th in the year of our Lord 2026. So glad you could be with us today. As you know, this program is set aside for you to ask your questions, give your comments on any topic whatsoever. And in my role as host of this program, I will endeavor to answer your questions to the best of my ability, using our Catholic faith, scripture, tradition, the fathers, the medievals, the saints, the doctors, the popes, the councils, the catechisms, encyclopedias, and just about anything I can find to help you walk away satisfied that your question has indeed been answered. We come to you every Wednesday from 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you haven't noticed, I've been away for 2 weeks, enjoying my Christmas and New Year's vacation, and all ready to get back in the saddle and work until I can't work anymore. And that's what's going to happen today, because we have a lot of questions piled up over the last 3 weeks. So we'll see how much we can get into them and get through them. So as you know, you can ask your question, and there's just 2 rules. When you ask your question, you can type it in your box and send it to us. And the first rule is to put the word question in capital letters before your question, so I know it's a question. And second, to be kind and considerate to your fellow chat members, and everybody gets along and happy and walks away with more love in their hearts than when they came. Isn't that nice? And that's the way Christianity should be, spreading love all around, and not get big-headed, not, think you know everything and denounce everybody else, and to be patient and kind with someone who doesn't know as much as you, and everybody can get along great. And that's, man, if we can do that, we'll make Jesus very happy, I'm sure. So, let me see, what's going on? Anything in the news? Well, yeah, a couple things. One is I got a new camera for this program. I don't know if you can tell if the picture's better out there than it was before, but did do that, and got a new microphone. So I hope it sounds better, because people were complaining about it sounding choppy and staticky and all that kind of stuff. And I hope it's better now. And I cleaned up my office too. So hope it looks better. That's as far as the aesthetic portion of our program. As far as production, I saw the first part of the new video on our series, How God Made the World in 6 Days. And it's fantastic, as I thought it was going to be. And just very hard this time to put it all together and get it all done. So our producer is working very hard, and I'm sure it's going to come out in a couple weeks, but he's got to do some editing, because we told him of some places that, need some improvement, and that's how the process works. So that's in the works, just around the corner. That I can tell you for sure. What else? We have the new DVD, of course, The Copernican Conspiracy, 3-hour DVD. And I think, did we put that up on YouTube yet? No, I don't think we did. And that is made for high school kids and, college kids. It's a still picture drama, and I like it. Every time I watch it, I just love it. So highly recommended for your high school and college kids, because it's drama, deals with 3 college kids working against their physics professor on this whole issue of cosmology, what goes around what, which is important, as you know. So that's been selling very well. And let me see, what else do we have? Okay, I just completed the new video, 2.5 hours. Took a long time. Called Fatima Failure and the Future. Fatima Failure and the Future. And that we are first going to put up on our Substack, and then we will put it up on YouTube. But that was just completed, and that gives yours truly's answer to how to interpret the whole Fatima issue. Some people think it's been there's an imposter, Sister Lucy. Some people think that the consecration of Russia has never been done, and we're still waiting for it. Some think it has been done, but only partially. All kinds of theories out there. And I deal with all of them in that video. So that is it's done production, it's ready to go into post-production. And it's just a matter of putting that up on YouTube. And I think, let me see, I don't know if we're going to put that on DVD or not. Probably so, because we always put everything on DVD, even though it's a dinosaur. Some people like DVD, so that's what we do. That is done, and then what am I working on? I'm working on putting the book Demise of Catholic Scripture Scholarship into video, and then we'll put that on YouTube, and that's almost done. We're putting the Book of Tongues in video, and that's almost done. And let me see, what else are we doing? We are going to put into a paper and a disc my chat with ChatGPT. My chat with ChatGPT on geocentrism that I was talking about 2 months ago, when it occurred. Actually, September or August, I think I had that. And as soon as I get all this other stuff cleared out of the way, that's what we'll be dealing with. And there was one other thing. What was I? We put the, we're going to make a new edition of the book called The First 4 Days, and that's going to be over 600 pages. And a lot of it is from the script from the movie, How the World Was Made in 6 Days. So that's going to become available. We have the book Geocentrism for Dumbskis put into audio. So that's going to be, and a lot of people have been asking me for audio, not video, audio of putting some of our books in audio so that they can listen to them in their car or, places where it's not convenient to carry your computer with you, but you want access to listening to books. So we're going to try to do that this year. Takes a lot of time, but as long as I have your support, we can do anything. So got a lot of big plans for this year, as you can see. And so I can't think of anything else, but we do work hard, that's for sure. And we appreciate you, all of you, for coming each Wednesday with your questions. And I'm glad I can help you. And it's just wonderful. That's all working out. So with all this new stuff, let's get going and see if we can answer some of these questions. Okay. Hello, Robert. Can you watch this video from this false teacher, I'm afraid, to many people who follow and believe him? My guess is that he is a Freemason and a false teacher. I like to have your opinion on his teaching. Merry Christmas to you and your family. Okay, so I did watch a good part of the video, Eddie. And at the 11-minute mark, the man rejects the Trinity. He says, you've been lied to. So, right away, where he's coming from. At first, he's talking about Luke 16, the parable about the rich man and Lazarus. And, he's making some good points about how you're supposed to read those parables, because it is a parable. And he's saying that sometimes we read it symbolically, sometimes we read it literally, and he's right, And so that allowed me to say, okay, he seems to know what he's talking about. Let me listen some more. And then when I listened, got to the 11-minute mark, as I said, and rejected the Trinity. So I'm not sure where he was going after that, but I wasn't going to listen to it. So you wanted me to give an evaluation of the video. So there you go. Yeah, the man's teaching heresy. So, and I don't think he obviously doesn't know it. So, you avoid him at all costs. All right, someone else sent me a video and asked me to give my opinion of it. Now, this one's a little longer, and it was about an interview that Raymond Arroyo from EWTN had given to a scholar named Margaret Barker. And she wrote a book and recently published called Christmas, the Original Story. And he was interviewing her because he had written a book for children on the Magi and who they were, where they came from, and all that kind of stuff. And he was very intrigued about, this is Raymond Arroyo, was very intrigued about Margaret Barker's book because she has some very new perspectives, interpretations on the Magi. So I wanted to listen intently to everything. So I listened to the whole interview, and she says some things that I wish could be true, because it would definitely give us more information about the Magi. But I don't know whether they are true, okay? And one of them is a connection between the Magi and the priesthood of Melchizedek, because her claim is that the Magi were from the priesthood. They weren't just, wise men from some foreign place in the East. They were the priesthood that continued under Melchizedek. And if that's the case, I mean, if I have yet to read her books, I just listened to the interview. But if that is the case, that the Magi were the priesthood of Melchizedek that was continued after it was mentioned briefly in the Old Testament when Abraham met Melchizedek. And why is this significant? Well, because the book of Hebrews tells us that the priesthood of Jesus Christ, which is the priesthood he gets for becoming the Son of God and Son of Man together, is from the priesthood of Melchizedek. It's not from the Levitical priesthood of the Old Testament. You would think that because there's even a book named Leviticus that talks about the Levitical priesthood and talks in detail about all the things that the Levitical priests had to do to offer sacrifices to God for the sins of the people, that because of all that history, that Jesus would come from the Levitical priesthood. But the whole point of Hebrews is he doesn't. The Levitical priesthood is abolished. It's superseded by the priesthood of Jesus Christ, which comes from the priesthood line of Melchizedek that started in Abraham's time, long before the Levitical priest even existed. Okay? So that's what makes the priesthood of Melchizedek very important. And so if the Magi are continuing the priesthood of Melchizedek, and what is implied in that is that Jesus Christ takes over from them, that Jesus is related to the Magi a lot more closely than we have understood before. Before, we just thought these Magi were some wise people representing the Far East somewhere, and were bringing these gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh, to show that all of the world wants to worship Jesus, and will even do so as a baby, him as a baby. And that's where it all starts, because he has to be a baby first and then grow into a man, of course. But that's all the significance that we had attached to it. So if this lady is right, Margaret Barker, and she sounds like she knows what she's talking about. I can tell from doing this for the last 50 years who knows what they're talking about and who doesn't. Not, that I'm 100% correct, but you can pretty much tell by the way they speak, what sources they claim, how cautious they are about scholarship in general, and whether they know the languages, Greek, Hebrew, Latin, and just how they conduct themselves under scrutiny. And she seems to check all the boxes, okay? So she's no joke when it comes to scholarship. She been there and done that. And so, I need to follow up on this. A couple other points that she mentions. Let me see. She says that the Magi do not come from the Far East. Now, I think we just read in, was it the Old Testament reading for Mass last week or the week before? Sheba, Dedan, were the places where it was prophesied that the baby Jesus was going to receive gifts. Now, I haven't read her book, so I don't know how she connects Sheba and these other places mentioned by Isaiah 60, I think it is, with her contention that the Magi come from east of Jerusalem. So not very far away, okay? there's not much going on east of Jerusalem, according to the maps. A lot of more activity is happening in the west of Jerusalem. And by and large, there's not much activity going on east of the Jordan River in biblical times. Most of it is taking place west of the Jordan River. So it makes the east of Jerusalem a much more remote area than the west. But she says they're not coming from, far away in the Orient somewhere. They're coming from east of Jerusalem. And she says there's a father that Justin Martyr who mentions this, that the Magi are coming from just east of Jerusalem. So they're not coming from a long, long distance, as we have, more or less understood prior to Margaret's work. And specifically, she says they came from southern Jordan. So Jordan, I don't know how much to the east it is of Jerusalem, but I have to look on the map to check that out. And I think that, if I remember correctly, the cities she mentioned was Petra in Jordan, southern Jordan. So got to check that out. Nabatea, I think, is the larger area. Nabatea is, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. And then she says there is a Syriac document that says the wise men were 12 men, not 3. And that they came from southern Jordan, the Syriac document says. And that they were continuing the priesthood from the house of David, high priest from the house of David, which implies a possible connection to the Melchizedek priesthood. And her whole theme was that there were 2 priesthoods, and they were competing against one another. And the Pharisees were the head of this, bad priesthood that was continued from the Levitical priesthood. And then there was this continuing line of the Melchizedek priesthood right up until the time Jesus was born, and that Jesus was going to take over this Melchizedek priesthood. And the other priesthood was going to be, whatever word you want to use there. It's going to go into abandonment, abolished, cease to exist, whatever. Okay. So, and she says, when you see the 3 wise men, usually they are depicted as an older man, a middle-aged man, and a younger man, to present the fact that 3 is a convenient way to present them, but that they represent all of the priesthood, old, young, and middle age. And I've seen that too. Three wise men are depicted with vastly different ages, in their looks. And she said that's the reason why, because they're representing a larger number, and that number would be 12, according to this Syriac document. Now, I'm sure she has the Syriac document in her book, Christmas, the Original Story. I think I ordered that from Amazon. Not positive. If not, then I have to. So again, I'm just going from the notes I took when I listened to the YouTube presentation. And she also says that the phrase "from the east," which is taken from the sentence in Matthew, I believe, the Magi from the east, And I didn't have time to look this up because I've been very busy this week. And I put this on the shelf, and I shouldn't have before I did this program. I should have examined these things. But so you'll have to forgive me. I'm not fully prepared here. I'm just going to give you the facts, and then I'll come back next week. And I will have done my due diligence in examining in detail what Margaret says. And then I'll give you my final report. And again, my opinion, okay? So I'll wait until then. But she says that from the east in Hebrew means from ancient times. Now, that is one that I find hard to believe. And I have a feeling it's because there's a discrepancy in the letter of the Hebrew word that can be mistaken for another letter, which means ancient times, is I think what's going on there, but I don't know because I haven't looked at it yet. So I'm just giving you the bare facts here. She says the Magi and the Melchizedek priesthood that they come from were exiled in Jordan, southern Jordan. And they now know that the Savior, Jesus, as a baby, has come, and they are now going to escape and come down to Bethlehem, where he's born, and continue the Melchizedekian priesthood. So again, you see the whole thing is hinged on this Melchizedek priesthood. So if this is true, if she can prove it, we have a remarkable development in the Christmas story, as you can see. She says even the gift of myrrh that is given by the Magi represents holiness, and it was used in the Melchizedekian priesthood, myrrh. She says, and it's now being used for Jesus because he's the restorer of the Melchizedekian priesthood, and they give him this gift of myrrh to symbolize that. Gold, she says, represents Jesus himself, and frankincense is also something used by the Melchizedekian priests and given to Jesus, so he can now use it. That needs to be tightened up a little bit, I think, all that stuff. But she says in John's gospel, and again, this I didn't check, but she says when it says Jesus of Nazareth, she says it really says Jesus of Nazareth. And Nazareth, and I didn't check this in the Greek, okay, or even the Aramaic or Hebrew, but I will, means restorer. So it's Jesus of the restorer is what it's saying. Okay. Let me see here. Okay, so she says that in the Hebrew, that would be Isaiah chapter 7, I believe, where it tells the king to ask for a sign. Ask for a sign. And this is God talking through Isaiah. and God's pointing to Jesus, of course, because Isaiah 7 is prophesying the coming of Jesus. And before that, God says to the king, ask for a sign. And she says there is a Dead Sea Scroll of the original Isaiah, and that says, ask a sign of the mother, is what it says, instead of just saying ask a sign. And so she believes that this Dead Sea Scroll puts weight on the mother in the whole nativity, scene. And it says the virgin, not a virgin, in the Dead Sea Scroll. It says, the one that says, a virgin shall bear a child and we should call his name Emmanuel. Well, she says the Dead Sea Scroll says the virgin shall have a child. Okay. Now, the star that came over the house of the house where Jesus was born, that's what it says in Matthew 2:9. And I was curious as to how she was going to handle this, because most people skip right over the words of the New Testament and create their own version of what the star is and what it did. Okay, so let me read that to you. When they had heard the king, they departed. This is the Magi. And lo, the star which they saw in the east went before them till it came and stood over where the young child was. Okay, so when they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceeding great joy. So you can see why this would cause some confusion, because it says the star stood over where the young child was. Okay? Now, you're not going to get any conjunction of the planets, which some people interpret the star to be, or the some other star in the sky that's not a planet, it's a real star, to come right over the house where Jesus was. Okay? I mean, think about it. The star, in order to come right over the house, has to be very close to the house. 10 feet, maybe 20, 100. After that, it could be so high, it could be pointing to, the house next door instead of the house that Jesus was. So this has to be, if you're going to follow the scripture in its literal meaning, okay, because if it meant something else, it would have told us. But if you're going to follow in this literal meaning, this house or this star was right over the house, so that there was no mistaking that this was Jesus's house. Okay. But I don't know too many people, if any, who interpret it that way. They're always looking for, constellations or stars or planet formations in a distant sky. How is that going to come over the house? Okay. And how are, even if you go back, it doesn't matter where the Magi came from. They didn't come from Jerusalem or Bethlehem. They came from a different place. Even if it was southern Jordan, that's a long ways away, miles away. So how could a star that's in the sky, you've seen the stars in the sky, how could that star in where it's at lead anybody to a specific place on Earth? It just can't happen. Okay? Unless that is not the kind of star that's in the sky, but is called a star because it's a bright light, a miraculous bright light that can lead the Magi down a road by being, say, 1,000 feet in front of them. Go this way, this road, not that road. That's the way it would have to be. Okay. And yes, that would have to be a miraculous star. Well, the whole thing's miraculous, of course, right? So, but if you're trying to find some natural causes to the star, you're not going to be successful, no matter what theory you have of astronomical occurrences and phenomena. Okay, so she says she doesn't know, which is a good, honest answer. And I accept that answer because she knows what Matthew 2:9 says, that the star stood over the house. Okay. Any scholar worth his salt is going to scratch his head over that one, because the only way you can really answer it and be, reasonably sensible is that it's a miraculous, small, very small light that could stand over the house. So it has to be smaller than the house. You see? A pointer is always smaller than the thing it's pointing to. And so she says that some astronomer says that it was Venus. So she took his word. She says, I don't know whether he's right or not, but let's say that he is. And that's because Venus is the morning star. So I don't know what difference that makes, because first of all, Venus is not a star. And second of all, it's just as far away over the horizon as any star would be if you looked at it. So what makes a difference whether it's Venus or not? But she was all impressed by the fact that some astronomical scholar, told her that one would see Venus on this certain day in 731 BC. And that's where she believes the Melchizedekian priesthood was somehow associated with that time in history. So, these are all loose ends. Whether, anybody can tie them all together is going to be a hard task. So this is where the theory gets a little edgy, and I wouldn't put my trust in any of it, but but it does give us an opportunity to point out that this star, which she said she doesn't really know, and I respect that, is not some astronomical star. Okay. So if you ever hear anybody, and there's plenty of videos, Catholic and Protestant, that have tried to make an issue that this star is some, star out over the horizon. No, it's not going to fit. It's not going to fit the gospel. Okay. All right. And she also makes a big deal, which I thought was interesting, of John calling the Jews the Jews. He does that 70 times in his gospel, because there is competition between the second temple and the first temple. The first temple is Solomon's temple, built in around 931 BC, when there's a lot going on there, but that's the first. The second temple would be under Ezra and Nehemiah. They tried to build the temple there. And then you have Herod's temple, of course, in the first century AD. But she says there's this competition between the second temple, where the Jews, she says, are dominant. Now, the Jews got their name, the Jews, right around the time of Zechariah, Zephaniah, Haggai, around 500 BC or so, 450 BC. They were not called the Jews prior to that. They were called the Israelites. Okay, so the name Jew comes from that period of the second temple. you see, the Ezra and Nehemiah temple. And that temple is competing against the first temple, Solomon's temple, of which the Magi in the priesthood of Melchizedek had the dominance. Okay. And she says that first temple priesthood was emasculated by the second temple priesthood of the Jews, okay, which turned out to be Pharisees, Sadducees, all those people around Jesus' time. And that's why the Jews are so dominant when Jesus comes, because of the second temple superseding the first temple, okay? And the whole idea is to get this first temple back in usage among the majority of the people from Israel. And let me see. Oh, yeah, she gets into the sons of God tradition. The firstborn of the sons of God protected Israel. Yeah, there's some interesting stuff, but we got to move on because so I'll report back on this issue next week, okay, after I do my examination of it. Right now, I just wanted to give you the facts because I thought it was so fascinating. I've never heard anybody give a report on the Magi as Miss Margaret Barker has. So there it is. You can do some investigation on your own if you want. The book, again, is called the Christmas, the Original Story. All right. Okay, let's go on here. Man, that took a while. Why did Jesus Christ teach to the crowds if he wanted to hide the gospel from them anyway? Wow, what a great question. Okay, so yeah, and he cites Mark chapter 4, verses 11 to 12. If I remember correctly, Jesus says there, or Mark says of Jesus, without a parable, he did not speak to them. Okay, wow. That is an amazing statement, because if you go back and you read Matthew's version, Luke's version, it says that Jesus taught them in parables because seeing they shall not see, hearing they shall not hear, which fulfills the prophecy of Isaiah, in which God will blind them to the truth so that they cannot tell the truth. Wow. I mean, think about that. That is, if you take the raw truth of that statement, that, and then the next part of it, of course, is, but to you, he's talking to the apostles, to you are given the truths of the kingdom through these parables. So these parables are doing double duty. For those that are blind to the truth already, the only truth Jesus is going to give them is the truth in a parable. And they're going to hear the parable and they're going to say, what does that mean? They just have no concept because their hearts are not there already. And in order to, how would you say, what word would you say? In order to prove this, in order to manifest it, in order to show everyone how God deals with such people. Because the question would be, if somebody's not going to listen, who were supposed to listen, these were the people that were supposed to listen, the Israelites, and they're not listening, Does God take a neutral position and say, oh, well, they're not going to listen. So be it. And just not do anything? No, that's not the kind of God we have. We have a dynamic God who doesn't just, twiddle his thumbs if you're not going to listen to him. He is going to rub it in that you're not listening to him. And he's going to rub it in by talking to you as if he really wants your cooperation, and yet he's going to put it in language that actually manifests even more stringently your disbelief in him. That's the kind of God we have. Okay? So, and you can prove this by going back in the Old Testament and seeing all the times God dealt with these people and how he got fed up with their reactions. Like the manna in the desert, Here he saves them from starving and gives them this quite tasty bread, and they get sick of it. And they want meat, just like they had when they lived back in Egypt. Here they are in the desert. If they had obeyed God, they would have made it to across the Jordan and into Jericho within the year of leaving Egypt, probably 6 months. And they don't. They end up being there for 40 years. Why? Well, because they kept complaining to God and saying, it's not good enough. What you're giving us is not good enough. You don't give us enough water. You don't give us enough food. We want the meat that we had back in, Egypt. And they can't have meat now, okay? Because they're in the desert. It's going to spoil, and they don't have any refrigeration. So you can't have meat right now. But then he gave them meat. He gave them the quail. As a matter of fact, he says in Numbers 11, I'm going to give you so much quail that it's going to come out of your nose. God says that to them. You ever use that phrase to someone? Yeah, I'm going to give you so much of it's going to come out of your nose. Well, that's where it comes from. God used it himself because he's so angry with these people. And the quail could be piled up 6 foot high for, hundreds of feet, thousands of feet, quail all over the place. Okay. And that quail turned out to be what? Well, it's spoiled. It's spoiled. You can't keep meat in the desert. And they still ate it, and most of them died from it. Okay, so this is the kind of God we're dealing with. You're going to complain about the food I'm giving you? Manna from heaven? And you're going through the desert? Well, here's my answer to that. Yeah. And yeah. So, this is why Jesus spoke to the Jews in parables, to bring out their unbelief. Because why? Their ancestors did the same thing. Okay? This generation is no better than the previous generations. As a matter of fact, they're worse. And Jesus is going to make a point of it. All throughout his 3.5 years, he's going to make a big point of it. Because that's what he did. Every time he was with the people, he spoke in parables. Now, you know what happened when he gave them the bread. Remember? The 5,000 people. He gave them the bread. And when he told them he was the Son of God and that they have to eat him, they all walked away in unbelief. So again, that proved that they were unbelievers. They were only following him because of getting a free meal. Well, let's get the free meal. Let's see what this is all about. I can just see husband talking to the wife and the kids. And so, yeah, today we're going to get some free food from this guy named Jesus. And they never expected Jesus to give them a spiritual lesson like, hey, I'm the real food from heaven. You need to eat me. Instead of taking him at his word and saying, wow, he really wants to get intimate with us. This is not your average Joe preacher. This guy's talking about things we've never heard before, and they are intimate. No, instead they say, you're an idiot. You're crazy. And they went back to their unbelief. Okay? So as spectacular as God tried to make it for them sometimes, the more they left him. Oh, Jesus. So wise. All right, let's go on to the next question. My eyes are not working today, so I got to use my glasses. Hello, Dr. Robert. Why did Christ not marry? I know that he had a mission to give his life as a ransom, but wasn't he the perfect ideal human, and didn't God order humans to reproduce right from Eden? So why wouldn't Jesus Christ, as the second Adam, reproduce? And did he also have sexual urge as part of his human nature? Thanks, and Merry Christmas. Okay, as you can see, these questions are from, last month. I didn't get the answer. So, well, because Jesus had a mission. That mission was to die on the cross, be our Savior. And that does not entail getting married and having children, okay? That's the last thing you would want to do if you had a mission like that to accomplish, okay? And then we have all the teachings that St. Paul has given us on whether someone should get married or not. 1 Corinthians chapter 7, okay? And he says to the Corinthians, I wish all of you could be like me, an unmarried man, because being unmarried means I have more time to give to the service of the Lord. And that is certainly true. And that's why we have a priesthood in the Catholic Church today that does not allow its men to get married. They're celibate. Why? Because the church wants them to use all of their time, all of it, for service to the church and to God. Okay? And those that have the other gift, the gift of living with a wife or a wife living with a husband, they are to use that gift, he says. Each man has his gift from God. Okay? So Jesus, of course, can pick which gift from God he has. And that is to be a single man. And that's solely because he is going to be the Savior of the world. Now, on the other hand, when all this saving effort by Jesus is accomplished, he is now ready to get married, right? And that's why the book of Revelation talks about Jesus coming back for the marriage supper of the Lamb, and he's the Lamb. And he's going to marry his wife, the church. And they're going to have a big celebration, and however God wants to put that together, he has already determined, and we'll be recipients of it, being invited to the wedding, and we'll be part of the wedding because we are the wife of God in the sense that he marries us spiritually speaking. And this all started in the Old Testament when God declared that he himself was the husband of his wife Israel. Okay. And then when Israel became unfaithful, he talks in various passages like Jeremiah chapter 3, that his wife Israel committed adultery, and for that God is going to divorce her. As it says in Isaiah 51, verse 1, that God is calling for the divorce papers that were allowed to be submitted to a wife who was caught in a indiscretion. And God uses that. And then Ezekiel 16 and 23, where God talks about Israel and Judah are two sisters who are whores, Aholah and Aholibah, and one's worse than the other. And why do you do that? Because you are consider yourself married to Israel, and she goes off with other men. And there's some very, very intense language in Ezekiel about what actually Israel does. And God is just, you can tell his heart's broken and he is angry, and that's why he uses this language. But in Hebrew, it's quite graphic. I'm not going to say it here, but it is quite graphic. And so we can consider God married to his wife Israel at that time, you see. And that's why he gets so upset at Israel. Okay? That's why he speaks in parables. Because he catered to this woman like nobody's business. And every time he did, she just scorned him, spit in his face. You know, all kinds of nasty things like that. So, yeah, it's a long tale between Israel and God. And hopefully his wife in the New Testament, the church, doesn't do the same thing, but she could. And sometimes I believe she's halfway there, and hopefully she can hold on till the end. But at any rate, that's the reason he didn't get married. All right, so I've spent an hour on these questions. So I won't deal with that one. Let me just deal with a couple more here, and then I'm going to go to the board and get your questions that have been written in here. Dr. Sienna, should Christians drink poison as indicated in Mark 16, verse 17 to 18? No. When it says in Mark 16, they should drink poison and shall not be harmed, it's talking about drinking poison accidentally, not purposely, like some Protestant Pentecostal preachers have done in the past. Where is it? You want to see how much faith I have? And they're drinking, poisonous liquid, and then they die. So no, we're not supposed to go out there seeking poison to drink. If you do that, that's your intention to go show off that you can drink poison and not be harmed by it. God will let it harm you, okay? Because that's not the reason he would save a Christian who has drunk some poison. All right. Okay, dear Robert, you in my question is asked why Jesus used spit to heal, which you didn't answer. Kindly explain why did he do it? Excuse me, which an unbeliever told me was gross. Yeah, it might be gross to some people. Back in those days, it wasn't gross. Spit was used for a lot of things. But look, this man can't see, but he can feel. Okay. So Jesus using his spit, he could, get it between his finger and his thumb and put it on the man's eyelids. And he would feel it because he would know it's a liquid. Okay. And he would feel it on both eyes. So because he can't see, Jesus is going to have him feel the healing. Okay. So in whatever way Jesus can do that, he's going to do that. And here's one way, because he can feel the liquid, the spit, on his eyelids. And it also implies that he's going to be healed. This is a sort of a sign language that Jesus gives him, okay? Spit sometimes can, we have a lot of antibiotic compounds in our spit. Okay, not as much as dogs do, but dog spit, you don't have to worry about being licked by a dog. Okay, because their spit is probably one of the cleanest things you'll ever find on the face of the earth, where these enzymes that are in the spit clean or kill the germs immediately. That's why a dog can eat crap and eat meat and everything else in between and never have a problem. Sometimes they'll get a problem. They eat too much of it, or something's happening, something else is. But generally speaking, same with human spit, although it doesn't have the same amount of enzymes that dog spit does. But it can be used to clean off something of bacteria. Okay, your human spit, yeah. I mean, it might not do a perfect job, so it could work temporarily. All right, and people knew that. They knew that spit has that property. I don't know where they got it from, but that's a cultural thing. So it would be natural to use spit, even as a sign, because the man's blind and Jesus is putting on his eyes. Okay. So culturally, they would understand, oh, he's using spit. But of course, the spit's not going to cure the blindness, but the spit is going to convey the idea that Jesus is miraculously going to cure the blindness, you see. So there's a connection there between what's going to happen and the vehicle or medium that Jesus is going to use, because he knows the people are watching, okay? And he knows the man is sensing everything that's happening to him. So that's why he would use spit in that sense. Not that the spit is miraculous, but that the spit conveys God's miraculous healing. Okay? All right. And the other thing too, Jesus has to bring the faith out of the man. And so he puts the spit on his eyes and he says, "Can you see?" Now, what's Jesus doing there? Because the man says, "Well, yeah, but I see men walking as trees." All right. So you figure what he's seeing is figures that are tall, like 5-6 feet tall. They're thin, and so that looks like a tree, because a tree, if you didn't focus on it, let's say you didn't get a clear picture of it, they could be as tall as a man and as thin as a man. Okay. And so it's like you trying to look at something with squinting your eyes, and you just can't focus with the squinty eyes, but you can see figures that look so tall and so wide. That's what he saw. So in other words, the man's faith is starting to come out to allow him to see men as men, but he can't yet. He sees them as just objects that look like men, but he can't focus on them. He doesn't know exactly what he's looking at. And then a little while later, then he's going to see the men fully in focus and know that they're not trees, they're men. And that's when his faith really comes to fore. And that's what Jesus wants to bring out. Wants to bring out the faith of this man, which leads to the completion of his miraculous healing. You see? Sort of a tug of war Jesus is having with the man and the faith. And he wants to bring out as much faith as possible. Okay. All right. So let me go to the board here, because I'm spending too much time. Okay, Margaret. Okay, see where we are today. All right, looks like we don't have many questions today, so we might be able to get through this quick. All right, question. Since the Webb Telescope cannot prove the non-existent expansion in the universe, how do scientists purport to prove it is expanding? Well, what they're starting to do, and it's not working, but what they're starting to do is that they say there was a quicker galaxy formation in the early part of the universe than what they had thought before, you say. See, and so maybe we should explain what the problem is before we give you an answer to your question. So this new telescope they have, the James Webb Telescope, that works with infrared light instead of white light. And then it's turned into white light images for us, okay? Has been able to see further into the recesses of the universe than the Hubble Space Telescope, which worked on white light. And in seeing further into the universe, what they should see, if the Big Bang Theory is correct, is galaxies that are not fully formed. They are infant galaxies, let's say. Why? Because in the early explosion, you'd have the attempted formation of these galaxies, but they didn't have enough time to develop, and so they would carry their embryonic stage with them as the universe expanded. And so at the edge of the expansion, we should see these embryonic galaxies. Okay? But here's the thing, we don't. Any of them. None of the galaxies are embryonic. They are fully formed galaxies, which means if you're going to believe in the Big Bang, you have to believe that somehow these galaxies fully formed in that very time that you say they didn't fully form before, when in your previous Big Bang theory, because you have no choice now. Okay, they got to form sometime because we see them fully formed in the James Webb Telescope. You can't make that go away. Okay, so something's wrong somewhere. Oh, by the way, is this the one? Somebody sent me I think this is the one. Maybe I should count this. Yeah, I'll deal with this after I deal with this question. So, they're going to have problems. So the question is, so what gives? You know, how are you going to support your Big Bang theory now with these fully formed galaxies at the edge of the universe? No, they'll say known universe. Okay, so all right, known universe. You still got the problem. Even if there's a universe behind what you see, still got a problem. Okay, because you got fully formed galaxies that shouldn't be there. So how do you? And our questioner Deborah is asking how they explain this. So the only thing you can say is, well, the galaxies formed earlier than we thought. Yeah, but that messes up everything else you said before those galaxies were formed. You see? There's just, photons waiting to be gathered together. So when did that occur? You have to push everything back now. If you say the galaxies are fully formed at the beginning, so they don't have an answer. Look, the Big Bang Theory is a total whitewash. Absolute total whitewash. You have to believe in imaginary things like multiverses, singularities, in superluminal inflation, dark energy, dark matter, superluminal expansion, contradictions with quantum mechanics, general relativity, the indiscriminate use of general relativity when special relativity will deny things to you. I mean, it's just one thing after the other. And now they have this galaxy formation problem. So, and then there's another problem, which I will mention here. And I may have mentioned this before, but there's a new study done, and it's on YouTube. And you can find the title is The Anchor of Modern Cosmology Just Shattered. The Anchor of Modern Cosmology Just Shattered. And it talks about, you remember me dealing with the cosmic microwave radiation, right? We made a movie about this back in 2014 called The Principle. And one of the components of the cosmic microwave radiation is called the dipole. Now, the dipole is radiation that is blue on one side and red on the other. Now, what does that mean? Well, it's redshifted. The light is redshifted on one side and blue shifted on the other. So the blue shift means that the radiation is coming towards you, and the red shifted means it's going away from you. Okay? So that's a fact. There is this thing called the dipole, CMB Dipole. And so how does modern cosmology answer this problem? Or that's not a problem. How do they answer this phenomenon? Well, are you guys seeing my light go in and out, like get brighter and then dimmer, brighter, dimmer? Because I just got a new screen, curved screen, one of those new curved screens. And I just keep seeing the light being brighter and then dimmer, brighter and dimmer. Anyway, if you have seen it, let me know. So let's get back to this dipole. It exists. It actually exists. Blue on one side, red on the other, which means the light is coming toward us or going away from us. And the way modern cosmology has tried to explain this is that because the sun is going around the Milky Way and carrying the Earth with it, that when we see the redshift, it's the Earth going into the light. I'm sorry, when we see the blue shift, it's the Earth going into the light, and that's why we see the blue spectrum. On the other hand, when we see the red spectrum, then that's the Earth going away from the light. So it's because the solar system is revolving around the Milky Way galaxy. Okay, and man, they thought they had the best answer to that, the dipole, until they came into face with this evidence that I'm going to give you. But they also had a problem before that, because there's a thing called the quadrupole and the octupole, where you see the same green and red, but they explained that by a totally different mechanism that has nothing to do with the Earth moving. So the immediate question is, why do you explain the dipole, redshift, blue shift, in this way, and the quadrupole and octupole in a totally different way? Doesn't make any sense, because they're basically the same thing. They're just divided more. The quadrupole is divided twice, and the octupole is divided another double, and until you make it eightfold. But they're basically the same thing as the dipole. Okay? Just different ways of looking at it. That's all. So why do you say they have two different origins? That's the first problem. Here's the second problem. That there's the quasar dipole. Okay? That's the light from the quasars that make a dipole, blue and red. Well, what's the problem there? Well, here's the problem. Because the light that you say is coming toward the Earth when the sun and the Earth go around the Milky Way is coming at us at 365 kilometers per second. Okay? And you wanted to use that as your standard speed because that would make the CMB a sort of an absolute in itself. If it's all going the same speed, then we can count on the CMB being rather stable. You see, if we can say that it's gone 365, no more, no less, and has always done so, that gives us some kind of absolute to go by. And that's what they try to do. They try to make the CMB an absolute. And they measure everything against the CMB, you see. But here's the dilemma. The quasar dipole, okay, has the light coming in at 1,400 kilometers per second, as opposed to 365. So if you're trying to explain the dipole, blue or red, by saying that it's the Earth going through it at 365 kilometers per second, well, then where does this 1,400 kilometers per second come from? It can't come from the Earth going around the Milky Way because you got two different speeds. Okay? The best the Earth is going to give you if it's moving into the light is one speed. Because you're not going to say the Earth speeds up and slows down, right? Can't do that. So they got another problem. And you'll find this on this YouTube. Now, here's the thing. If you use this information, let's say you go to ChatGPT tonight and you plug in this information I'm giving you, or you go to the video yourself and watch it. And you take notes and you give them all to ChatGPT. I don't know why they made that name so hard. Why did they do that? ChatGPT. It's a mouthful. At any rate, ChatGPT will say, yeah, but those reports are coming from non-peer-reviewed scientific opinions. And they aren't from the established scientific sources. That's what ChatGPT is used to doing now. Whenever you find challenging astronomical phenomena to its Big Bang bias, that's what it will say. Not peer-reviewed. Not from all the experts in the fields of cosmology. Yeah, so that's what it's programmed to do. But here's the reality of life. If you presented this evidence, which is totally anti-Big Bang, to have, the evidence is what? Now we have at least two sources, two different speeds for the CMB dipole. And they know that that's going to just totally destroy the Big Bang theory. The peer reviewers won't even look at this stuff. They are designed to protect the Big Bang. So any information that's brought to physics letters A or physics letters D, they will totally be rejected if it doesn't support the Big Bang theory. Case closed. Okay? Same thing will happen if you write a paper that challenges Einstein's special relativity or general relativity. They won't even look at it. The peer reviewers, whose job it is to sift out truth from falsity. Yeah, this is the way it's been for the last 100 years. So that's what you're going to get from ChatGPT. At any rate, let me move on with next question. Thank you for your question, Deborah. Question: has there been any whistleblowers, scientists that has come out and called them out on heliocentrism? No, because as soon as they do, they will lose their jobs. Okay, that's part of the whole ball of wax here. It's not just getting the information. It's trying to get the information past the gatekeepers. And that just ain't going to happen. Okay? What did Santa get for you for Christmas? I got a Ryobi pressure washer with matching dry vacuum. What did I get? Well, I didn't ask for anything, so I didn't get much. I learned my lesson. My wife got me a bottle of men's cologne, very nice men's cologne. And that's all I needed. No, it's all I wanted. Unless she has an alternate message she's trying to give me. Which I don't think so. I think, she's very kind. So, all right. Question: after the axis of evil, is there anything new that is mind-boggling to them? Yes, we just went over it. That there are several speeds. As a matter of fact, there is. I have it in Geocentrism 101, the 9th edition. There are at least 4 speeds to these. First of all, you have radio galaxies, quasars. You have regular galaxies and some other radiation sources, which amount to 4 different speeds. So it's not just 2 they have to grapple with now. There's 4 speeds out there. So you can't say any longer that, there's just one speed out there, the 365 kilometers per second. No, can't do that. So as we can see, the Big Bang is slowly falling apart. And someday it's going to be like, Goliath out there, and he gets shot with a stone right in the middle of the forehead, knocks him out, and somebody chops his head off. It's going to be real sudden like that, I think. It's just not here yet, okay? We have to wait a little. Will you upload the 4-hour-long video journey to the center of the universe on YouTube? You want me to do that? Yeah, that would let me make a note of that. I'm just wondering if 4 hours is too much for them to handle. I don't know. But, I have to see about that. Let me make a note. Okay. All right. I will consider that. All right. Question. Joe Heschmeyer just laid out an awesome explanation of how the finding at the temple was basically prophecy to Mary about the Lord's passion. It was very interesting, but is it true? Well, I'd have to know exactly what he said. Finding in the temple. So what phrases, what sentences are being used to say that this is a prophecy about the Lord's passion? You'll have to enlighten me. And you still have time. We got a half hour you left, Bat Boy. Let me know what those sentences are, and I'll give you my opinion. Okay? Question. In all your years of debating Protestants, what is the one thing you've learned in the debating them, and why is it that Protestant apologists simply cannot see Christianity the way Catholics do, even though they lose debates? It's similar to a quote that I heard from a evolutionist named the guy from Harvard. What's his name? Gosh, I'm so bad on names these days. Let me see if I can find it. But no, this isn't it. Made me think. I think this is it. Okay. Oh, Gould, Stephen Jay Gould. The little anecdote he one of my friends sent me. He says, before he died, Larry Azar was working on a book called Squabbles. Essentially, evolutionists sticking their feet in their mouths. A favorite was always the one from Stephen Jay Gould about the lack of transitional forms in the fossil record. He said it was a trade secret. Now, I hope you know what he's talking about. It's if you're going to have evolution of species, then you should have gradations to the evolution. It's not going to come like, okay, here you have a dinosaur, and then somehow you suddenly get a bird, right? They think birds come from dinosaurs. And the stages in between the dinosaur and the bird are called transitional forms. But there aren't any, okay? You don't find any transitional forms between a reptile and an amphibian, okay? They just aren't there. They theorize that they're supposed to be there, but they're not there, okay? So I remember writing a book about this many years ago, and the companion of, and I'll get to your question in a second, the companion of Stephen Jay Gould was Niles Etheridge from England. He was the curator of the Natural Museum of History in England. And he went out and tried to find transitional fossils, okay, between a bird and a reptile, or reptile and amphibian, and could never find any, okay? And sometimes Stephen Gould would go out with him. And so he knew the circuit that they hadn't found none that they could bring back to society and say, here's a legitimate transitional fossil, okay? And so they had a meeting in Chicago in 1982, and Stephen Gould was the principal speaker, and he had to admit to his fellow colleagues in paleontology and anthropology and all the rest of them that were there that we have a problem in evolutionary theory, and that is that we don't have evidence of transitional fossils. And so we have to come up with another theory to explain this. And the theory I've come up with is, what was it called? Oh gosh, I can't believe I forget the name of the theory. Anyway, I'll remember it in a second. At any rate, where we have to say that the reason no transitional fossils were formed was that the upward gradation from lower species to higher species took place so fast that they didn't have time to make transitional fossils. That was the theory. Okay. Oh gosh, what the heck is the name of that? My mind is going. I'm getting too old. But then he talked about his debates up until he died. When did he die? 98, was it? Stephen Gould died? Yeah, I think it was 98. And he said this when he debated Christians. Now, these Christians are not your normal Christians. These are Christians who run these institutions that deal with creationism as opposed to evolution. And they have their PhDs in, paleontology and anthropology and, many other sciences that deal with these issues from the same universities that, Harvard, like Stephen Gould went to Harvard, and Niles Esridge went to, Stanford, Yale, all the major universities that teach evolution. They now have their degrees, the Christians do, okay? Protestant Christians, not Catholic Christians. Catholics are, I don't know, how would you say it? They have an aversion to creationism. They love evolution. So there are hardly any Catholic creationists, much less those with degrees from prominent universities. So a credit to the Protestants on this issue that have held the torch for Catholics for a very long time. And Catholics need to catch up, but it looks like it's going to be a long, hard road before that happens. At any rate, Gould said of the Protestants he debated, in 100 years, we have had 100 major debates with creationists, and we've lost every one of them. We need to stop debating these people. One thing I liked about Stephen Gould was he was honest. I mean, you got to be an honest man if you hold a conference in Chicago of all the world's top scientists and admit to them that you can't find the fossils, the transitional fossils that are the heart of your evolutionary theory. You've got to have some quinones to be able to stand up there and say that. But that's what Stephen Gould was like. And God bless him. I hope the Lord has mercy on him, because there are not many scientists out there that will admit to you in a conversation, oh, no, there are no. Yeah, you're right. There are no transitional fossils. So, yeah, there's good ones, there's honest ones, and there's bad ones. Unfortunately, we have more bad ones than we do honest ones. So in your question, this is what I have experienced in my debates with Protestants on the Bible, how to interpret the Bible, what the Bible is, where it came from, how we use it, how we interpret it. I've had more victories over Protestants over the very Bible that they claim as their supreme authority, where I would say that's the one thing I've learned. You can beat them in a debate, but they're not going to admit it. They'll say things like, oh, what a good debater you are, or how do you remember all those things, or, various things like that, but they will never admit that they lost the debate. Okay. So when I go in, if and when I went into a debate, I remember that. The object is not to win the debate, because they will never admit that they won. The object is to beat them up so bad with their own Bible that everyone knows that you won and they lost, but nobody talks about it. Okay. Because look, if they admit they lost, their debating career's over. And I am sure that their Protestantism is not long from being over. But what I've learned is it takes much more than just knowledge and cornering someone in a trap with knowledge to becoming a Catholic. It's the whole ball of wax of becoming a Catholic. That for some people, all of those boxes have to be checked. Not just, I didn't do so well in a debate with a Catholic. Okay. There's much more to it than that. That's what I've learned. Okay. All I do basically is set the stage to take out the biggest blocks that may be hindering them. But there are other blocks that, the Spirit of God is going to have to deal with, you see. But I thought I'd just give you this little anecdote there to compare notes about debates and what they do. Here we have one honest evolutionist telling us that he's lost every debate he's been in with a creationist. But the point is, he's still an evolutionist. And he was an evolutionist until his dying day, even though he lost by his own admission, he lost every debate he had with the creationists. So go figure. All right, let's see what else we got here. My wife and I are denied communion on the tongue last Sunday at Mass at San Diego. What's up with that? I don't know. I don't know. Complain to your priest. You got to use the proper channels. Complain to your bishop. Write a letter to your bishop. Okay, and then he'll tell the priest, stop that. It's the only thing you can do if you want to receive it on the tongue. Okay. Short of capitulating to them and receiving it in your hand, if you want to receive it on the tongue, you have the right to have that addressed. Get the answer. Okay. I can't answer it for you. All I know is the church allows both communion on the tongue and communion in your hand. Okay. Why didn't Herod just put a tail on the Magi to locate the place of Jesus' birth instead of killing all the infants in Bethlehem? That's a great question. It would have been a lot easier, huh? Put a tail on the Magi. Because I don't think he knew that he could catch the Magi, even and that's saying that it may not have been possible to put a tail on them. Okay, because once they got the message that Herod was after them, they're going to do everything they can to hide and hightail it out of there. Okay. So that's because of supernatural intervention. So maybe the answer is that Herod didn't have the prerogative because he knew it wouldn't work. But he knew what would work. The babies can't move. They can't move out of Bethlehem. So, and if you have a warped mind like his, where power is everything, you're going to do everything you can to preserve that power. And something as evil as killing the infants doesn't even register on his conscience. Okay. So, again, knowing that he can't catch the Magi and knowing that the infants can't move spells disaster. Anyway, I was taught that the three wise men were disciples of Daniel, and that's how they knew where and when to look for the newborn king. It was Daniel's teaching and calculations that led them to him. Okay, so That is, yes, that is one theory that's out there, but we don't find that in the book of Daniel. Okay, that's the problem. There is some apocryphal literature that has that theory. Okay. And I think Margaret Barker would be favorable to that theory because she thinks that Daniel is the one prophet through whom the Melchizedekian priesthood was preserved. Okay. So she might like that idea, and the two would jibe together. So I want to see, because I'm going to get her book and see all the little details there, and I'll report on them the next time. Where did that paper go? Okay, here it is. So I have to order that book. Again, the book is Christmas, the Original Story by Margaret Barker. Old woman, she must be, 85 or so. He's quite old. Might not be around for too much longer. I don't know. Okay, question. Light speed query. If outer galaxies are at light speed, how are we seeing them, or anything for that matter? If outer galaxies are at light speed, how are we seeing them? That question's light speed in both geocentrism and heliocentrism. Can we see them? I'm a little confused about your question. Let me see if I can help you out here. Outer galaxies, they're not at light speed. Okay, what's at light speed is the universe itself. Okay, the structure, the components of the universe, the matter that makes up the universe. That's what's going around. It's like a bowling ball, let's say. Okay, you spin a bowling ball. All the internal guts of the bowling ball are all going the same speed as the bowling ball is spun, right? Twisted. So relative to the universe, the galaxies are not moving at all, unless they have what we call proper motion, where they can move themselves within the, like a speck in the bowling ball can move from, right to left or left to right. That's kind of hard. Maybe a jello ball, right? Jello sphere. You might get a speck of matter that might move inside the jello. But by and large, everything is stuck to the jello ball and rotates with the jello ball, right? So relative to the jello ball itself, the speck is not moving. Relative to the observer on Earth, okay, the jello ball and everything in it is moving faster than the speed of light, okay? But it's a question of which perspective do you use, okay? Because the jello ball doesn't care or know about you in the center, okay? Just by force laws it may know, but it's not you. Your observation is not going to determine the laws of what the universe rotates with or by, okay? So you have to be careful what you mean by, light speed. Light speed relative to what, okay? So now, when we talk about light coming to Earth from the galaxies, the light also is moving with the rotation of the universe, okay? That's point number one. Point number two would be, how is that light getting to the Earth in a sort of reasonable amount of time? Because if the speed of light is 186,000 miles per second, it's not going to reach the Earth. In some cases, it might not reach the Earth at all, because that, as far as cosmological speeds, is too slow. Okay? And even though that light beam, if it could curve around the Earth, goes around 7.5 times in 1 second, when you're talking about the distances to the galaxies and the stars and how that light's going to reach Earth, it's a whole different ballgame. They're so far away that even though light can go 7.5 times around the Earth in 1 second, it can't get to the Earth in a large amount of time if it can only go 186,000 miles a second. So what's going to make the difference? Well, we would say that on Earth, in Earth environs, which is our local environment, and that's an inertial environment, by the way. Why? Because the Earth doesn't move. If the Earth doesn't move, you have an inertial environment. And in an inertial environment, the speed of light is 186,000 miles a second. We would agree to that. Okay? So that's why we would say light, reflected light from the moon is going to hit the Earth in what? I don't know, 2 seconds, 1 second, and 1.5 seconds. Okay, why? Because it's going 186,000 miles a second. But that's in an inertial environment because the Earth isn't moving. Everything else out there, all the galaxies and stars and everything, they're moving, and they're moving pretty fast. The only thing that isn't moving is the Earth. And that's why the Earth is the only inertial environment in the whole universe, because everything else is moving and moving pretty fast. Once you get past Saturn, they're all moving beyond the speed of light from our perspective, okay? So if that's the case, and that's a perspective we want to use, how's the light from the galaxies going to reach us on Earth? Well, because the galaxies are moving so fast, they're in an non-inertial environment. That is an accelerated environment. And in that case, even Mr. Einstein agrees that the speed of light is way beyond c being 186,000 miles a second. Okay? And that means that the further you are out from Earth, going out into the deep recesses of outer space, the faster the light's going to travel. So in the end, it all balances out. The farthest galaxies away from us, their light is going to reach us on Earth at the same time that the nearest galaxies are. Why? Because the light farther from Earth in the distant galaxies is going to travel a lot faster than the light where the galaxies are closer to us, like Andromeda, for example. Okay? That's just the physics of the thing. And even general relativity agrees to that. So we have a lot of support. So, I mean, I gave you a lesson on light speed and galaxies and all that, so I hope all that helps you. It may not be exactly what you asked, but it's the place I had to go. All right. How should our Roman Catholics defend the use of icons? For example, is there biblical support? Yeah, there is biblical support. I mean, even in the Exodus, where the very command was created, we have the cherubim and the seraphim over the Ark of the Covenant. These are, fixtures that are molded into looking like angels that have wings, because the wings cover the whole Ark of the Covenant. Okay? I mean, if that's allowed, then obviously icons are allowed in some form. Okay? Now, the Jews never did, or I should say the Israelites, because that's what they were at that time. They never did make any kind of image of God, like a picture, okay? Like today we have pictures of Jesus. There may be pictures of God the Father as an old grandfather in heaven with a long white beard and all that stuff. what's my point? My point is that there is a difference today between the Israelites who made no images of God and Catholics who make images of Jesus, who's the Son of God and the Son of Man. Now that's where the demarcation came, you see, because you couldn't make an image of God in the Old Testament because no one knew what God looked like. So any image you made of God would be wrong. Okay? Now, granted, we don't know what Jesus looked like, but we have a general idea of what he looked like. He looked like a normal man, maybe a normal Middle Eastern man, okay, with dark hair, dark eyes, eyebrows, not somebody from Sweden, let's say. He physically took that form, and that we could say that he took the physical form of a man, a true man. And so we can depict what a man looks like and generally be very close in that image that we create, you see. So that's where the demarcation was made. And the church said, now it's different, you see. Whereas before, no one could make an image of God because no one knew what he looked like. We have a general idea of what Jesus looked like, and that's true. So what is true can be accepted. And so we can draw a picture of Jesus hanging on a wall and, understand that it may not be perfect, but it's a good resembling of Jesus as a man. And in being a man, he also was God. And so that image of him as a man also carries the idea of him being God. Okay. So, the church had debates about this because it's not a slam dunk kind of question. Okay. Because there's a reason why in Exodus you weren't to make images of God, because people had a tendency to worship images, you see. And even they did that with false gods. I mean, Isaiah's complaint about them is, they'll take a piece of wood home and they'll burn it in the fire. And then the next day they'll take a piece of wood home and they'll carve it into a statue and worship it. And he said, how silly is that? So that's what the Ten Commandments were focusing on, is this tendency to worship images that had no true depiction of who God was. And there's a good reason for that. And we would hold to that today, you see. We would hold to that today. Except with Jesus, it's now different, as many things are with Jesus, being the God-man, are. And this issue about images and statues is one of them. And the church decided in the 7th century that, the iconoclast controversy was over. This is our answer. It's okay to have these images. Just as long as you understand that you don't worship images and things like that, then there's nothing wrong with it. Okay? All right. Somebody from Brazil, how are you? Hope things are well with you. Question. All right, we got about 4 minutes left. Sorry about that. Isn't there a proof or way to record the Earth from a distant satellite to see it not rotating and not revolving, moving? No. There isn't. Okay? That's the problem. Anytime you have a satellite there taking in an image of this Earth or a moving film of the Earth, that Earth is going to be rotating, and because the camera is going around, okay, from east to west, the camera is going around the Earth, so it's going to look like the Earth is going west to east. Okay? There's nothing you can do about that. Personally, seriously, why do you look so young? I look young? Aren't you just north of 70? I just want to know for my own benefit. If I look like you in my 70s, yeah. I got this Italian skin. It doesn't wrinkle. So I have an aunt in California who is 90 plus years, and she doesn't have a wrinkle on her skin. So, and I'm full-blooded Italian, 100% on both sides. So, and my skin has always been that way, and it gets that way in old age. So I guess that's the reason. Yeah. If you don't believe in the Big Bang, what is the alternative? The alternative, turn to Genesis chapter 1 and read from the beginning. In the beginning, God made the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the waters. That's the alternative, you see. And we have a whole, maybe you aren't familiar with this, but we have a whole video series being created on that very fact called How the World Was Made in 6 Days. Go to robertsongenesis.com or .org and get that video, How the World Was Made in 6 Days. And it will explain to you what the alternative is. Okay? Yeah, the earth came first, not the stars. The stars were created on the 4th day. And there was light created, but that wasn't the stars. That was on the 1st day, and you'll find out what that light did. Okay? So it's all there for you. Okay, what accounts for the small amount of speed detected by the Michelson interferometer experiment? The answer to that is the zero speed is because the Earth isn't moving. Okay? If the Earth is moving zero, then the results in the Michelson interferometer are going to be what? Zero. Okay? And they did that experiment how many times? Let me see. From 1881 to 1930 was the last interferometer experiment that was performed. Over a dozen scientists, different scientists, did that experiment. And that's over 50 years. And guess what? They got the same result every single time within a margin of error. Okay? Now, they did one experiment in 1925 that was to measure rotation, not the revolution. Because when we say this, if you say the Earth goes around the sun, you mean it revolves around the sun. But the Earth is supposed to be spinning on its axis, right? That's what the heliocentrists or Copernicans need. They need both. They need a revolution of the Earth around the sun and a Earth spinning on its axis. Otherwise, their system doesn't work. Okay? Now, the Michelson interferometer done in 1887, okay, showed them that the Earth wasn't moving, wasn't revolving around the sun. So the next good question for Michelson is, well, what about the rotation? Since we need a rotation to make the heliocentrism work, let's see if we can get a rotation. Okay, so he did his experiment in 1925 using the same interferometer, just had to orient it differently to get a rotation instead of a revolution. And guess what? He got 100% of the rotation, 100%. Whereas Michelson of 1887 got 0% for the revolution of the Earth, but 100% for a rotation. Now, how can that be? You got the same machine using the same principle of wave interference. One comes out 0%, the other comes out 100%. How can that be? Well, the geocentrist has the perfect answer. In the geocentrist view, the Earth doesn't revolve around the sun, right? Because it's standing still in space. But for the rotation, the universe is rotating around the fixed Earth. You see, instead of the Earth rotating in a fixed universe, the universe is rotating around a fixed Earth. And so that's why Michelson would get a 100% result in his 1925 experiment if he's trying to find rotation. But since in the geocentric system, the Earth isn't revolving around the sun, he's going to get 0 for that one. So it fits like a glove. An absolute glove. So there you go. All right. It's after 5. Got to go. And sorry I missed all these other questions here. I mean, let me copy them down, and maybe we can answer them next week. Okay? So don't be disappointed. All right. I got them. All right, folks. Thanks for being back with me after my vacation. And that'll only happen once a year, I think. But we'll see you back here on the 14th of January. And I hope you're enjoying the warm weather we are in the east here, where it's 50 degrees, thank God. And we'll see you next time. Bring your questions by email or by on the streaming here, and see if I can get to them. And there's some other questions I haven't got to on those of you who have sent in email questions over the last week or so. I'll get to those next week. Okay? All right. We'll see you.